Hey, what's going on, guys? OJ back with another video. I'm sorry, I didn't drop my reaction to Marvin Vettori versus Roman Dolizzi 2. I had a hard time adjusting to a different time zone right now. Anyways, this week is going to be UFC London, Leon Edwards versus Sean Brady. And even though I'm going to miss every fight on the card because the card will take place during my flight back home, I still want to break down every fight on the card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event. So without wasting any more time, let's jump straight into the video. Starting off with the early prelims, Guram Kutateladze versus Paul Fernandez. I'm going with Guram Kutateladze. In order to beat Guram Kutateladze definitively, you either need to be really quick on the feet or incredibly durable, and I don't see either of those traits out of Paul Fernandez. Now, Fernandez did beat Muhammad Yahya in his last fight. Whoop de fucking do. My grandpa beat Muhammad Yahya last night. And then he lost to Mark Diakis, which isn't the best look, to be honest. Maybe Fernandez made massive improvements since, and I'm not really going to bank on an improvement for someone to definitively beat Guram Kutateladze, so I'm going with Guram Kutateladze to win this next fight. Up next, we have Callan Lochran versus Nathan Fletcher. I'm picking Nathan Fletcher. I've just seen Callan Logren lose a lot, whereas Nathan Fletcher is still a prospect to be on the lookout for. In hindsight, a loss to Jake Hadley at bantamweight is not aging well, and he got his ass whooped by Taylor Lapilus. Plus, Nathan Fletcher showed finishing potential by getting a first round arm triangle against Zigimantis Ramaska, whereas I yet to see Logren really finish anyone in the UFC. Overall, the momentum and finishing potential is what I will say that gives Fletcher the ability to win this fight. Up next, we have Shauna Bannon versus Pooja Tomar. Now, part of me wants to pick Pooja Tomar because I watched her get her ass whooped by Rihanna Amanda for 3 straight rounds, and somehow she still won the fight. But I just can't pick Pooja Tomar to win a fight because she isn't UFC caliber in the first place. Now, Shauna Bennett isn't really all that, but I've seen her win a UFC fight legitimately, so it tells me Bannon is at least UFC caliber. I wouldn't be surprised if Tomar wins via robbery decision, but assuming the judges aren't corrupt as shit, Bannon should get the job done. We move on to Andrea Pulyayev versus Christian Leroy Duncan. I'm gonna go with Christian Leroy Duncan. Andre Pulayev is making his UFC debut against Christian Leroy Duncan, and I believe that is a very tough challenge for anyone making their debut in the middleweight division. Now, Leroy Duncan is coming off that brutal beatdown by Gregory Rodriguez, but Rodriguez is actually very good. And I doubt that someone making their UFC debut is as good as Gregory Rodriguez. Before Duncan fought Rodriguez, he was coming off two fight win streak off brutal knockouts in the first round. I could be wrong, but there's a very small chance that someone making their debut can beat a guy like Leroy Duncan, unless this guy is a future top 10, top 5 ranked contender to be out on the lookout for. I expect Christian Leroy Duncan to do what he does, which is knock people the fuck out in the first round or two. Moving on to Machin Taibura versus Mick Parkin. I'm gonna go with Mick Parkin on this one. Now, there is a possibility Taibura just blob checks Mick Parkin in the later rounds, but the thing that separates Parkin from every other blob heavyweight is the fact that he actually understands jiu-jitsu. He hasn't really got a submission in the UFC, but he won via rear naked choke in the first round during his contender series fight. So it tells me he isn't going to be completely useless on the ground. A lot of Tiburo's wins come from shooting takedowns and blob checking heavyweights, but against Tom Aspinall's number one training partner, I don't see Tiburo being able to implement that game plan as easily. Maybe Tiburo outpaces Parkin, but at the age of 39, how many times is Tybura gonna fraud check every upcoming heavyweight blob before we say he don't got it no more? Again, open to the possibility of a Tybura fraud check, but I believe in Parkin's momentum. And I also believe Parkin is more technically sound than Marcin Tybura. I'm picking Parkin to win inside the distance for this fight. Moving on to Loner Kavanaugh versus Felipe Dos Santos. I'm picking Loner Kavanaugh. For those of you who follow my Instagram, you know how high I am on Loner Kavanaugh. Dude got some wicked kickboxing, and despite being 5 feet 4 inches tall, he really knows how to use a variety of kicks in his arsenal. Yes, he didn't get the knockout in his last fight against Jose Ocho, but I think Jose Ocho is a lot more underrated than people give him credit for. Meanwhile, Felipe Dos Santos has been going 50-50 in his UFC career, and he's coming off a loss to Andre Lima. Not a bad loss, but I think Loner Kavanaugh is almost as skilled as an Andre Lima. A lot of people might pick Dos Santos off the fact that he went to a competitive decision with Manel Cap, but Manel Cap does that where he throws like 10 strikes per round, and you wonder how the fuck Cap hasn't put away his opponent, uh, even though he's much better than his opponent. And also, you have to look back on Dos Santos' career. I don't see that much finishing potential coming from him. Whereas Kavanaugh, he has a few knockouts on his record on the way to the UFC. I expect this to be somewhat of a scrappy decision, but looking at the finishing potential and who's coming off better momentum, I say both of those things favor Kavanaugh, which is why I'm going to pick Kavanaugh to win this fight. We move on to Jai Herbert versus Chris Padilla. I'm going with Chris Padilla. Even though Padilla doesn't have any wins on his records that stands out, he's winning these fights via impressive fashion, and that is what's really impressive in my opinion. That fight with Rongju, where Padilla cut open Rongju's eye with a brutal elbow, was incredibly fun to watch. Now, Jai Herbert is a step up in competition for Chris Padilla, but the problem is for Jai Herbert, I don't see that much finishing potential. And I don't trust Jai Herbert to maintain distance for 3 straight rounds to get the job done. I know he almost head kicked Ilya Taporia, but outside of that, he's been going to lackluster range control decisions. Now, fair enough, these decisions aren't to low level competition exactly, but I don't see Padilla really having much to fear from Herbert, whereas Herbert could get knocked out cold by Chris Padilla. I'm going with Chris Padilla to either get the knockout or edge the early rounds before Herbert actually starts getting aggressive to barely win the third. But either way, Chris Padilla should win this fight. Moving on to Nathaniel Wood versus Morgan Charrier. This is a really tough pick, but I'm gonna go with Morgan Charrier on this one. I'm not dismissing Nathaniel Wood because he is very skilled, but I feel that Charrier has more tools in his back pocket than Nathaniel Wood. On the feet, I do believe Wood would be the better striker, but I feel that Sharia has the power advantage, and if someone were to mix in takedowns this fight, I believe Sharia will be the one to do so. The only way Nathaniel Wood wins this fight is if he gets the ball rolling from start to finish. Not to say that he can't do it, but to be perfect against a guy like Morgan Charrier for 3 straight rounds is such a tough ask, given the power Charrier possesses, as well as the variety of takedowns Charrier has in his arsenal. I say that this is going to be getting fight of the night, but I can see Sherry getting the more damaging shots off throughout the fight because he's just much bigger than Wood. And also, if the fight were to take place on the ground, I say that Sherrier has the advantages. Moving up the card, Jordan Vucenic versus Chris Duncan. I'm going to say that Jordan Vucenic torches the fuck out of Chris Duncan. A lot of people aren't that high on Vucenic because of his loss to Guram Kutateletsi. But one, Vucenic was making his debut on like 4 days' notice. And two, I thought the fight with Guram Kutateletsi could have been scored a draw, considering how badly Guram got butchered in that first round. If you are absolutely bodying Guram Kutateletsi on short notice in the first round, then I'm very confident that you can body Chris Duncan, uh, who is decent at best. Like if Manuel Torres and Vyacheslav Borshev can butcher you, then I have utmost confidence that Jordan Vucenic can twist you up like a pretzel or beat your ass for a finish. Not to say that Manuel Torres or Vyacheslav Borshev are bad, but I just believe in Jordan Vucenic's technique a lot more. I would say Vucenic by sub, but a knockout wouldn't be surprising either because Vucenic is just that good. Moving up the card, we have Molly McCann versus Alexia Thanara. I'm gonna go with Molly McCann. I don't know who the fuck this Alexia Thanara girl is, but all I know is that you can't trust most Brazilian prospects with a pretty looking record like 11-1 making their UFC debut. A lot of these guys or girls are fighting absolute schmucks on the regional scene, and it shows once they hit the UFC. spotlight. Like if Thanara was actually that good, I would have heard word from her from either the Dana White Contender Series or some of the obsessed regional MMA fans. Uh, I'd say chances are she's fought mostly schmucks to get into the UFC, whereas even though Molly McCann isn't that good, I know she's at least somewhat decent UFC caliber because she has a few wins in the UFC. I'm picking Molly McCann to either get a knockout in the early rounds or go to some boring ass decision that'll have us bashing our heads for making us watch a Molly McCann fight on a main card of a fight night in 2025. We're gonna move up to the feature fight. Kevin Holland versus Gunnar Nelson. I'm going with Gunnar Nelson on this one by submission. You just can't trust Kevin Holland to win a fight in 2025, especially when he's going up against a grappler. This is probably going to end similarly to a lot of Holland's previous fights, because while I do believe Holland is overall better than Gunnar Nelson, Holland will probably try to quit the moment Gunnar Nelson shoots a takedown. Now, I understand that Gunnar Nelson has only beat absolute schmucks, but at this point, can you confidently say that Kevin Holland isn't a complete schmuck in 2025? He's lost 4 out of his last 5 fights. I think 3 of those were by finish. I seriously don't know how much longer the UFC is going to keep Kevin Holland, but I don't believe the UFC is going to keep Holland that much longer because he's going to lose to Gunnar Nelson by sub, which means Holland would have lost 5 out of his last 6 fights. Moving up the card, Jan Blachowicz versus Carlos Ulberg. Now, this is very tricky because Jan Blachowicz is coming off a long layoff due to shoulder injuries, and also he's 42 years old now. But with that being said, I'm still going with Jan Blachowicz. If you watch Ulberg's last fight with Volkan Oezdemir, I thought Ulberg did a great job moving his feet, but Blachowicz ain't gonna swing meaty left hooks lunging at Ulberg nonstop. I reckon this is going to be more of a clean and technical kickboxing battle, and in a clean and technical kickboxing battle, I believe that plays very well into Jan Blahovich's game, a lot better than Carlos Ulberg's. Unlike Ozdemir, Blachowicz will extend combinations in his shots, and he's a lot more technically polished than Ozdemir, and also Blachowicz is defensively more responsible. I believe that Blachowicz is overall more experienced, and plus, if there is a takedown threat from either guy, we've seen Blachowicz use takedowns against Alex Pereira, whereas we have yet to see that part of game from Carlos Ulberg. While Blachowicz isn't coming back from the greatest of circumstances, I reckon that he will be able to show Ulberg the experience gap between the two, and the longer the fight goes, I like Blachowicz's chances even more. Last but not least, we get to the main event, Leon Edwards versus Sean Brady. I'm going with Sean Brady on this one. I believe Brady can implement the same kind of game plan Bilal Muhammad did, but take it one step further with the variety of guard passes and submission attempts Brady has in his arsenal. If you had to ask me before Brady's fight with Gilbert Burns, who would I have picked to win this hypothetical matchup? I would have gone with Leon Edwards. But now, I just don't see how Leon Edwards is really going to beat Sean Brady. Is he really going to get a head kick knockout? Maybe, but the fact that everyone is starting to catch on to this left high kick proves that Edwards needs to change up his game. Is Edwards going to get a submission win over Brady? Nope. Is Edwards really going to outpoint Brady over the course of 5 rounds? Maybe, but Brady is known for unrelenting pressure, and we've seen that in his fight with Gilbert Burns. If Leon Edwards is going to win this fight, he's going to have to manage distance for at least 3 rounds perfectly. I don't see Brady giving him that opportunity to do that, especially with the improvements Brady has made since his fight with Bilal Muhammad. And people talk about Brady's chin because he got TKO'd by Bilal Muhammad, which is really bad, but Brady was eating flush flying knees from Gilbert Burns in their fight and still pushed forward to win a 50-45 on the scorecards. I say that Brady is going to do what Bilal did, but even more dominantly. And plus, Edwards is going to have to face the submission threat of Brady's, which is something Edwards has probably never faced in his career before. Uh, Plus, I look at the momentum Brady is on right now. I think he's going to be able to get the job done. Whereas Leon Edwards, if he loses this fight, I think he's permanently out of the title picture. All right, that's going to be it for today's video. I'm sorry that this video is coming out a lot later than usual. And also, my voice is kind of dying because I've just been very busy throughout the whole week. It's taking me a lot. It's taking a while for me to. All right, that's gonna be it for today's video. I'm sorry that this video is coming out a lot later than usual, and my voice is kind of dying, which isn't good. It's taking me a lot of time to adjust to a different time zone. But anyways, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about the overall London card. And also let me know in the comments down below if you guys want me to post my reaction to UFC Vegas 104, Vittori versus Dolizzi 2, because I wanted to post that video right away, but passed out every time I try to work on that video. But other than that, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.